Now, the verse says, do they seek other than the deen of Allah, while all creatures in the heavens and the earth have willingly or unwillingly bowed to His submission? Now, in the Arabic it says, وَلَهُ أَسْلَمَ مَنْ فِي السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ طَوْعًا وَكَرْهًا. So what it's saying there in the Arabic is, do they seek other than this deen, when in reality everyone is in a state of submission, willingly or unwillingly, and to Him is their return. So the first meaning of Islam that we're getting in the Qur'an is all of creation is in submission. That's the first meaning. Because the word Islam means submission. It means, aslama means to submit. Now if we break down the word, so this is the first meaning that you will find in the Qur'an. That the idea that everything in reality is in submission to God. Willingly or unwillingly. We are all in submission. Now there are areas of submission that the human being recognizes. One of them is the call to nature. Right? We have to do certain things that we cannot avoid. One of them is to eat. That is part of our nature. We get hungry, we must eat or we die. We have to relieve ourselves once we've eaten or taken drink. We have to sleep, right? Byron called sleep the gentle tyrant. It oppresses us, but it's not an oppression that we mind. But sleep comes upon us and we can't fight it eventually. Few days maybe. Go too long and you go into acute psychosis. So the idea is that there are aspects, and then we have submission in our being. There are limitations to the physical body. We have limitations. We can only eat so much. We can only do so much physically before we're exhausted. We have limitations in our movement, given the structure of our bodies. So there's a type of a submission of the self, given that we are temporal creatures, limited to physical and limited by physical aspects of our nature. So in the Qur'an there is an idea that everything is in submission, and then there is a reminder that we will be returned. That if you look at creation, things are emerging and then returning into non-existence. Everything that has life comes into existence and then returns to non-existence. The plant, the vegetable kingdom, the animal kingdom, and ultimately the mineral kingdom. All of this is going into non-existence after it had come into existence. Now the next verse that I'd like to look at is 2:133. 2:133. It's page 53. Page 53 in the blue book. Surah 2, verse 133. The verse says, "Were you witnesses when death came to Jacob, Yaqub? Behold, he said to his sons, 'What will you worship after me?' They said, 'We shall worship your God and the God of your fathers, of Abraham, Ishmael, Ishaq,' or Isaac, 'the one true God, to whom we submit.'" Now in the Arabic it says, وَنَحْنُ لَهُ مُسْلِمُونَ. So here is an idea that the previous tradition, because remember this is the Qur'an coming, the Prophet Muhammad is teaching this Qur'an. And there's an idea certainly in most people's minds that Islam is the religion of Muhammad. Right? This is the idea that most people have. What's being emphasized here is something else. This is the religion also of Isaac, of Abraham. Because they're saying, we are submitting to your God and the God of those who went before you, and we are Muslims. So the second definition is Islam as guidance from prophets. Islam as guidance from prophets, irrespective of one individual prophet like the Prophet Muhammad or Jesus or Moses or Buddha if he was, Krishna. I don't know. I mean, there's prophets we don't know about. The Qur'an says some of them we've told you their stories and others we have not. But there is definitely an idea in the Qur'an that Islam is the teaching of all of these prophets. Now the third aspect is Islam as the religion of the Prophet Muhammad. So, the Qur'an is telling us that every creature is in submission to God. The Qur'an is telling us that previous prophets were teaching Islam as a religion. And then the idea that this is the religion, because there is a verse in the Qur'an that says, Al-yawm akmaltu lakum dinakum. Today I have perfected your deen. وَرَضِيتُ لَكُمْ الْإِسْلَامَ دِينًا. And I am content as Islam as your religion. That was on the final Hajj, the pilgrimage of the Prophet. He said this in front of a multitude. So this is that the final form of this Islam was perfected in the Prophet Muhammad. This is how the Muslims view Islam. Now you will meet many Muslims that might not have this idea, because like many Christians, they've never studied their book. They've never really, they're nominal Muslims. They were born Muslim. They might believe it because their fathers told them that this is true, or because, like many people in this country, they have fond childhood memories of Christmas, things like that, so they relate to Christianity or their Judaism, whatever. I mean, many people, this is really, bottom line, why they are what they are, because they were born into a certain environment. So if you were born in Sri Lanka, you might be Buddhist. If you were born in China, you might be a Taoist or a Confucianist. If you were born in America, you could be a myriad of teachings following, even now, paganism. I know a woman in Santa Cruz who's raising her child as a pagan quite consciously. They have altars to different gods, like the moon goddess and things in the house, and that's how she's raising her child, right? And this will become more and more common as people begin to break off. The homogeneity of previous periods is really breaking down. Like one of the poets said, the center is no longer holding, right? We're really seeing a breakdown of what some of them would call the grand narrative of cultures. That probably is not true in the Muslim world to the extent it is in the West, for a number of reasons. But certainly here we're seeing that. So now there is a fourth aspect of Islam that I'm going to add here, which is death. Because the word in Arabic to die is aslama. Aslama nafsahu. He gave up the ghost. Right? I mean, this is what we used to say. I remember hearing that expression when I was younger. He gave up the ghost. right? The spirit. He died, right? And it's interesting, I had a course from an excellent professor on death and dying in religions, and he had this sheet of euphemisms about death that was about, you'd be amazed in our culture alone how many ways we can say somebody died, right? Kick the bucket, that's all she wrote. Bit the dust. There's a lot of ways to say, one of the Arab poets, he said, إن لم تمت بسيف مت بغيره تنوعت الأسباب والموت واحد. If you don't die by the sword, you're going to die some other way. There are lots of ways to die, but death is one. Right? So this idea here really, I think, goes back to the fact that there's a verse in the Qur'an, in the chapter called The Event, in which the Qur'an says, وَإِذَا بَلَغَتَ الْحُلْقُومِ, when the ghost reaches the throat, وَأَنْتُمْ حِينَئِذٍ تَنْظُرُونَ, and you're watching this thing happen, right? وَأَنْتُمْ حِينَئِذٍ تَنْظُرُونَ. Allah, then it says in the Quran, make it go back. Make it go back. If you're in control, make it go back. So the idea there is, and then it says, and we're closer to Him than you are, but you don't see. The idea is that when the ghost gets to that point, the self, the soul, there's nothing we can do. That is absolute submission, right? And we can try, and we're pretty good now at doing, I've seen people, I worked in a critical care for about 4 years and was in a lot of codes, what they call codes. And it's pretty amazing. You see somebody, they're dead. You come in, no pulse, no heart, no breathing. Defibrillate, do some CPR, defibrillate. I've seen people come back, start breathing, and it's pretty amazing. But how long can we do that for? Ultimately, that stopped. And even the success of that is quite small, unlike television. I think it works 90% of the time on television. It works about 8% in the hospital, right? They had all these physicians complaining about that because if they coded their relatives, they'd say, well, why didn't it work? It always works on television, right? Welcome to reality, folks. Things aren't like television, unfortunately, or fortunately.